lawsuit to block the administration's $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund after Republicans pushed back on Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche over using taxpayer money to pay out the president's allies.
The Republican senators were pissed, and there were multiple senators yelling at the attorney general saying this feels like self-dealing. This feels like Trump cut a deal with himself.
Trump's new $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund is already causing chaos in Washington. Here's the deal. The fund, which is funded by taxpayer dollars, would pay people who claim they were politically targeted by the government, including some Trump allies, former aides, and even January 6th defendants who say they were victims of political lawfare. It was created as part of a settlement after Trump sued the IRS after his tax returns were leaked. The president dropped that lawsuit and came up with this instead. According to the DOJ, the money comes from the federal government's judgment fund, which is normally used to pay legal settlements. A commission of 5 people picked by Attorney General Todd Blanche would decide who gets paid, with convicted criminals having the potential to get hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands in payouts. Critics on both sides of the aisle are sounding alarms, questioning whether this is even legal and warning it could reward political allies with taxpayer money. Meanwhile, supporters argue the fund is meant to help people they believe were unfairly targeted by past investigations. And now lawsuits have already been filed trying to block the payouts before any money goes out.
Let me walk you through what just happened, because if you're not paying close attention, you may have missed the most corrupt thing a sitting president has done in modern American history. Earlier this year, Donald Trump sued the IRS. He demanded $10 billion from the federal government over the leak of his tax returns back in 2019. Think about just that for a second. The president of the United States sued his own government for $10 billion in his personal capacity. Here's where it gets worse. The Justice Department was supposed to defend the government against that lawsuit, but of course the Justice Department works for Donald Trump. So Trump's personal lawyers were negotiating against Trump's own Justice Department in a case where Trump controls both sides. And the federal judge in Florida, no less, saw exactly what was happening. She ordered both sides to come into the court and explain whether they were actually opposing each other or whether they were just colluding to hand Trump a payout. That deadline was this Wednesday. So today, Monday, Trump's lawyers made their move. They dismissed the lawsuit. They told the judge that no judicial analysis is appropriate. They cut the judge out of the process altogether. And in exchange, the Justice Department announced a $1,776 million fund. Note the number, 1776, a wink to the founding of the country, attached to what I would call a scheme that I think the founders would have been apoplectic about. The money is going to be controlled by 5 people, all handpicked by Trump's attorney general. They can pay out claims to anyone who says they were a victim of so-called weaponization by the Biden administration. And that includes the January 6th defendants that Trump pardoned. It could include entities tied to Trump himself. And this commission has no obligation to disclose how it makes the decisions. The Justice Department said Trump and his sons won't be paid directly. They'll just get an apology. But entities associated with the Trump family are not explicitly barred from filing claims. You know, we have tried to stop it. And unfortunately, Trump's lawyers are going to do whatever Trump wants, no matter how corrupt, no matter how unethical. Let me say very plainly what just happened. Donald Trump sued himself. He is settling with himself. He cut the judge out, and he's setting up a $1.8 billion slush fund of your taxpayer dollars to pay off his political allies without any court oversight, without any congressional approval or transparency. My Republican colleagues can't be bothered to do oversight. Never in the history of the U.S. has a sitting president sought a monetary settlement from the government he leads. This is the federal treasury being converted into a slush fund for Trump. And every American who pays taxes is the one who's funding it. Congress has to act. This is completely out of control.
The president sued himself. He sued the IRS, but essentially he was suing himself. And then he settled with himself for $1.7 billion to be deposited into a slush fund that the president can use at his discretion to reward his political supporters. We found out just hours ago that in that settlement is included a provision that stops the IRS from auditing the president or his family. So instead of ending the Iran war, instead of trying to do something about these spiraling prices and costs that are being borne by families and the federal government, the president has spent the last few weeks reaching his hand into the Treasury, stealing from the American people $1.7 billion to be put into a slush fund that he controls to reward his political supporters, and securing an agreement with the IRS that no matter how much fraud or illegality he and his family and his business entities engaged in, they are getting off scot-free.
So earlier this week, the Department of Justice had announced that there was a way to drop this ongoing lawsuit that IRS has with Donald Trump. And apparently the only way to do that is to create a fund of nearly $1.8 billion to be compensated to Trump allies. You heard correctly, Trump allies. And if you need more clarification, Jan Sixers. The Jan Sixers. Article coming from AP News, right? Justice Department announces nearly $1.8 billion fund to compensate Trump allies in a deal to drop IRS suit. Stated in the first paragraph of that article, the Trump administration announced Monday the creation of a nearly $1.8 billion fund to compensate allies of the Republican president who believed that they had been unjustly investigated and prosecuted, an arrangement that the Democrats and government watchdogs derided as corrupted and unconstitutional. Now, to understand how we even got to this point where the government is trying to create a $1.8 billion fund to compensate Trump allies, but if we're going to be honest, between me and you, right, and this is a safe place, it's not going to any of you MAGA supporters. It's going to go into Donald Trump's pocket, right? But in order for you guys to understand how we got to this position, I got to give you some more details. All right, so boom, getting straight into it, right? So Trump originally had filed that lawsuit against IRS on January 29th, 2026, right? The reason being is he stated that the agency had failed in preventing Charles Littlejohn from accessing his tax record. Who is Charles Littlejohn? The IRS contractor who leaked Trump alongside other individuals' tax returns and what they call the greatest, you understand, the largest data breach in history. This is the case in question. That is the reason for the creation of a $1.8 billion fund to be compensated to Trump allies. This is the case. And because I want to make sure that there's absolutely no room for assumption, right? The Trump allies, the Trump supporters that are to be compensated out of this $1.8 billion fund are the Jan 6 rioters. And let me tell you something, TikTok, right? You could take my old account. You can't take my memory. I remember distinctively, you understand, making a video stating how the president of the United States stated that in any lawsuit that he has against the United States government, that he technically can settle any amount to himself, any winning amount he can give to himself. I remember that. But you don't got to take my word for it. Look at this article title. Look at the title of the article. It states Trump quips about seeking DOJ settlement. I hereby give myself $1 billion. And now a fund of $1.8 billion is being created. And let me read aloud a quote from Donald Trump himself. You know, I brought a lawsuit and I'm winning the lawsuit. There's only one problem. I'm the one who has to settle it, he said. In other words, I am suing and I'm the one supposed to settle it. You heard it come straight out the horse's mouth. He files the lawsuits and then he has to settle against himself. And do you guys want to know my educated guess surrounding, you understand, this fund, right? Not a single one of you MAGA supporters, not a single one of you Jan rioters, not a single one of you Jan Sixers is getting a cent, a penny. You hear me? Not any one of you, not a single dime. He only mentioned y'all because he knew that there was going to be outrage behind the creation of a $1.8 billion fund, considering the United States of America is in the midst of a financial crisis. He knew this, but he also knew that if he attached you guys' name to it, making you guys think that you guys were actually going to benefit from this fund, that you would support it. As you do anything that Donald Trump tells you to support. You support it. I would bet big money, right, to state that Donald Trump is going to make sure to transfer every bit of that $1.8 billion fund into his own private account. I bet you not one of you guys is getting anything, nothing, nada, zilch. Donald Trump and the Trump administration doesn't give a damn about any backlash that they get from any other group or minority in America. The only ones that they care about is white America, MAGA, because that is the only voice that is influential. If this voice, if this group of people literally condemn Donald Trump for what he's doing, he's not going to be able to continue. He can't continue. So this is why he attaches you guys' name to every fucking thing that he does that's literally destroying the United States government. And you actually want to know how I know you're not getting a fucking dime? How I know you're not getting shit? Weren't you all supposed to receive $2,000 checks for the tariffs? Weren't you supposed to receive $2,000, right? Because it was supposed to be relief from the tariffs that your good president went and imposed for no fucking reason? Did you ever get it? The White House had confirmed that you were supposed to get it. It was confirmed. And then when it was brought up again, Donald Trump said, did I say that? Matter of fact, let me insert the clip.
You promised $2,000 checks to Americans based off of your tariff revenues. When can
I did do that? When did I do that?
Well, I mean, you're
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, I did 1776 for the military, right?
When will those Americans get those checks?
Well, I am going to. The tariff money is so substantial that's coming in that I'll be able to do 2,000 sometime, I would say, toward the end of the year.
Moral of the story is this. He ain't giving shit and you ain't getting shit because we done witnessed it. My educated guess is that Donald Trump is going to be pocketing every bit of that $1.8 billion. You understand? There aren't even enough of you Jan 6ers. No offense. There aren't even that many of you to even have a fund of this amount. $1.8 billion? Y'all MAGA supporters were the exact business, the exact stepping stone that Donald Trump needed so that he was able to actually stand among his peers, the billionaires. Because we can't deny it. MAGA has made Donald Trump more money than any of his failed businesses. There has not been anything that has ever put as much money than MAGA has as a business, because it's not about the people. You are all a business. And understand, the only way that Donald Trump makes money out of his businesses is when they fail. It's when they eventually fail. Y'all are all going down, and he's literally robbing you blind before that happens. And wait, there's more, right? So the Trump administration also stated that they were going to ban the IRS from auditing Trump, his family members, and his companies. You want to know why? So that you can't find all of that money. You can't find all of that money that he's been laundering, allegedly. Allegedly. You won't be able to find it. All of the money that he's been siphoning out of the United States government. He doesn't want you guys to be able to see it. MAGA, you are literally the stupidest group in America because you done gave this man the keys to the entire country. Well, not really the country. You gave him keys to the vault.
I seriously think Todd Blanche will go to jail over this. This is an absolute bank robbery of the American people. This agreement is so obviously corrupt. Even Republicans in Congress are like, no, this ain't it, boss.
I think it's stupid on stilts.
The next Democratic administration better not pull a Merrick Garland. This is a day one, hour one, minute one presidential executive order that says, fuck you, your stupid agreement and your stupid slush fund are gone. It is a very, very bad precedent for this country, and really bad precedent.
Everybody keeps referencing the fact that we wouldn't be in this place if the South had been duly punished after the Civil War. Well, not only did they get pardoned, the January 6ers, now we're talking about paying their legal fees, incentivizing them to go ahead and commit more crimes. If you remember, Rick, it was a false flag. Like, those weren't
the FBI
supporters out there. That's what they told us, right?
Don DeCon just created a $1.8 billion slush fund using your tax dollars, and the way he did it is even more corrupt than the fund itself. So here's what happened in a minute. Back in January, Trump sued the IRS for $10 billion. His own IRS, the agency he controls as president. He claimed they leaked his tax returns, which they didn't. A private contractor did, who's already in prison. Legal experts said the case was weak. The judge put in an oversight committee to review the case and was about to rule that a president can't sue his own government. So what did Trump do? He withdrew the case right before she could say that. No ruling, no court oversight, no accountability. So it's not a settlement because the case never made it to the judge's table. And in exchange, his own Justice Department, run by his former personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, quietly created 3 separate deals. Deal 1, a $1.776 billion fund paid by taxpayers controlled by a commission that Trump appoints and can fire whenever he wants privately. Explicitly set up to pay people Trump's claims were targeted. That includes the 1,600 people charged for January 6th, the people who attacked the Capitol, your tax dollars. Deal 2, $230 million set aside to cover Trump's own legal fees from the Russia investigation and the Mar-a-Lago raid. He used his presidency to shut down the lawsuit, then used his own DOJ to bill taxpayers for his personal legal bills. Deal 3, the federal government is forever barred and precluded from pursuing any tax claims against Trump, his family, or his businesses. The IRS cannot touch them for anything that's already happened. That's blatant corruption for a scamming president. The people who stormed the Capitol, attacked attacked police officers tried to stop the certification of the election that was not stolen, nearly half of Republicans believe Jan 6 was patriotism. 56% call it defending freedom because Trump spent 4 years telling them the election was stolen. And if you believe that, then the rioters are heroes. That's what it is. A lie that became a movement that became a lawsuit that became taxpayer-funded reward system with zero judicial oversight and no limits on who can claim the $1.8 billion being used at the discretion of a grifter using the weight of his office to influence elections and trying to buy another one.
So I see that everybody is up in arms that Trump is giving $1.8 billion to the January 6 rioters. And I personally feel like it is a slap in the face to all of the Black Americans that have been on the Democratic plantation. Argue with your father, argue with your meemaw, argue with your peepaw. I don't care. The fact that this man has barely even been in office for 2 years and he's been able to easily find $1.8 billion to give to people that stormed the Capitol literally is a slap in the face to Black Americans that have been loyal and dedicated to Democrats, to the blue party. Because what have they been telling us for decades now about reparations when it comes to us? What have they been telling us? Write it in the chat. Now, this is an excerpt from a New York Times article. It says the Trump administration has just created a fund to benefit people who believed they have been wronged by the federal GOV, including those like him who had stormed the Capitol 5 years ago. The possibility that people who ransacked the Capitol could get money from the government they attacked is the latest head-spinning twist in President Trump's effort to rewrite the history of January 6th. So one of the rioters said, "I'm glad it turned into something," he explained, "that could help people who have been hurting for quite a while now." Hurting since January 6th, what was that, 2021? That reaction, it turns out, appeared typical among the so-called Jan 6ers who have joined Mr. Trump in claiming that the efforts to hold them accountable for disrupting the peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election amounted in the mistreatment by the criminal system, the criminal justice system. So they claiming that they were mistreated by law enforcement for literally storming the Capitol. Now, I wonder if those people looked a little different, or if they had a different hue of complexion, would it be the same outcome? Or, let's play devil's advocate. What if it was people that looked more like me, but were Trump supporters? Would they too be able to get some of that money? How do I apply? Because if we could all apply and say we was there or affected, child, sign me up. At the end of the day, I do not see any of the MAGA on this app crying out about how their taxpayer dollars are going to go to people who literally were committing criminal acts, because storming the Capitol, rioting, they literally were stampeding over each other. Some people had firearms. It was literally a shit show. But the fact that they're about to get compensated, restorative justice for being treated poorly after a lot of them being pardoned. So they got to get out of jail free card, and now they're about to get their pockets laced with some cash. Yet us as Black Americans, our ancestors poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this country, have not seen a dime of restorative justice. That have been redlined, that literally have had communities burned down to the ground, that have been, hung like strange fruit from trees, had to experience the most demonic, heinous energy and acts of violence toward them when they tried to integrate schools, have had their intellectual property stolen. We've gone through so much in this country, yet Donald Trump was literally able to pull $1.8 billion out of wherever the fuck to compensate people that he feels was done wrong and unjust. Yet we've been getting told by the Democratic plantation that they need to do a study and they need to do some research and they need to figure out where the money's going to come from and they need to do this and a whoop-de-whoop and a hoop-de-hoop. We didn't even get a hate crime bill out of them. So you can be mad that Trump is doing this, but the fact that he's doing it shows that it was always possible. Where there's a will, there's a way. We've been getting duped. People have been playing in our face this entire time. Do with that what you will. And this is not me saying that I'm on a side or whatever, because I honestly feel like, for the most part, same bird, two wings. But things can get done. Things can get done if they want them to get done. Our movement has been hijacked by immigrants. Like, let's just call it what it is. What y'all think about this? Spread Love is the Brooklyn Way.
We have big news right now. Donald Trump's weaponization fund is already hanging by a thread in Congress, as Republicans are not just saying it privately, they're saying it publicly, that this weaponization fund is not good and that they're actually going to work to stop it. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania has already come out, issued a number of questions to the Attorney General and to the DOJ, and is saying that he's going to work to block this $1.8 billion slush fund. Senator Bill Cassidy, who recently lost his re-election bid after Trump campaigned against him, also came out and said Americans are paying too much right now for groceries, for gas. $1.8 billion should go to them, not in this slush fund of sorts. I said yesterday that this fund could be undone in a future administration and theoretically could be stopped by the courts. Well, it also could be stopped by Congress, and there is a very real possibility that Congress doesn't approve this fund to go forward, because remember, Congress gives out money, not the executive. We'll see what happens. Follow for more.